The hollow crown rain lashed against the windshield as Vincenzo Moretti's sleek black sedan cut through the downtown streets. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, the only outward sign of his tension. 3 blocks back, the unmarked police car still followed, persistent as a shadow. "They're still there," said Raphael, his bodyguard, voice tight with concern. Vincenzo didn't respond. At 45, he had survived 2 decades as the head of the Moretti crime family by anticipating trouble before it materialized. Tonight, however, he had miscalculated. The meeting with the harbor commissioner should have been routine, another official to add to his collection of purchased loyalties. Instead, it had been a trap. "Call it in," he finally ordered. "Tell Domenico to create a diversion near the waterfront, and find me somewhere to disappear, somewhere unexpected." As Raphael made the call, Vincenzo took a sharp turn into a narrow side street, the tires splashing through puddles. The city lights blurred in his peripheral vision, a kaleidoscope of neon and shadow. This wasn't the first time Detective Javier Ortega had come close, but never this close. Something had changed. Someone had talked. "There's a place 3 blocks east," Raphael said, putting his phone away. "Small cafe called Nocturne. Opened 6 months ago." "Not on anyone's radar." Vincenzo nodded and accelerated. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. He'd built his empire methodically, transformed his father's small-time operation into a sophisticated network that controlled everything from shipping routes to city contracts. Enemies feared him, allies respected him, and everyone knew the stories of what happened to those who crossed Vincenzo Moretti. But tonight, drenched and hunted, he felt strangely vulnerable. The cafe appeared around the corner, a modest storefront with soft yellow light spilling onto the wet pavement. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, the word Nocturne in elegant script. It looked unremarkable, exactly what he needed. "Wait in the car," Vincenzo instructed, adjusting his tailored suit jacket. "Keep watch. I'll signal if I need you." The bell above the door chimed softly as he entered. The space was small but warmly lit, with mismatched vintage furniture and walls lined with bookshelves. Only 3 customers occupied the tables, a couple absorbed in conversation, and an elderly man reading a newspaper. Behind the counter, a barista looked up and smiled. "Welcome to Nocturne," she said. "Terrible night to be out." "Indeed," Vincenzo replied, choosing a table in the far corner with a clear view of both the entrance and the back door. "Just coffee, Black." As she nodded and turned away, he studied her briefly. Mid-30s perhaps, with dark curly hair pulled back in a loose knot, olive skin, and an easy confidence in her movements. Nothing remarkable, and yet something about her seemed genuinely at peace, a quality Vincenzo had rarely encountered in his world. The coffee arrived quickly, rich and aromatic. Vincenzo took a sip, allowing himself a moment to appreciate its quality before returning to the problem at hand. Someone close to him had betrayed him. The list of suspects was short. He didn't trust many people to begin with. His thoughts were interrupted by the first notes of music. The barista had moved to a small upright piano tucked into an alcove beside the bookshelves. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, drawing forth a melody that was hauntingly beautiful. Not the ambient background music he'd expected, but something more intricate, more personal. "That's Amelia," the elderly man said, noticing Vincenzo's attention. "Best reason to come here. Coffee's good, but her music is better." Vincenzo didn't respond, but he found himself listening. The melody was unfamiliar, yet stirred something in his memory, like a half-forgotten dream. As the music continued, his phone vibrated. A message from Raphael. Police diverted. Safe for now. He should leave, return to his fortified penthouse, begin the process of finding and eliminating the traitor. Instead, he remained seated, coffee cooling before him as the music filled the small space. Amelia played with her eyes half closed, lost in the composition. When she finished, the few patrons applauded softly. She acknowledged them with a slight bow before returning to the counter. "What was that piece?" Vincenzo found himself asking when she passed his table. She paused, seeming surprised by his interest. "Something I wrote. I call it Rainfall Memories. You're talented. Thank you." Her smile was genuine, unguarded. "Most people don't really notice." It's just background noise, I noticed, he said simply. For a moment, they regarded each other, the feared crime lord and the cafe pianist, separated by worlds of experience, but connected by that brief musical bridge. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. "No," Vincenzo replied, leaving cash on the table as he stood. "But I may return." Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the streetlights as Vincenzo slipped back into his waiting car. His mind had already shifted back to the business at hand, the trader, the detective, the necessary responses. But somewhere beneath those thoughts, the melody lingered. "Take me home," he told Raphael. "We have work to do." As the car pulled away, Vincenzo glanced back at Nocturne, its warm light a small beacon in the darkness. For reasons he couldn't articulate, he knew he would return. Forgotten melodies 3 nights later, Vincenzo found himself back at Nocturne, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. The cafe was busier this time. A small crowd gathered for what a chalkboard sign called Wednesday Evening Melodies. He claimed the same corner table, ordered the same black coffee, and waited. When Amelia took her place at the piano, the cafe quieted. Tonight she wore her hair down, dark curls framing her face as she adjusted the sheet music. Without announcement, her fingers touched the keys, and music filled the room. At first, Vincenzo listened with detached appreciation, but as the melody progressed, something changed. The notes shifted into a pattern that struck him with physical force, a simple, haunting tune he hadn't heard in 30 years. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. It was impossible. That song belonged to another life, another world. His mother, Sophia, had sung it to him in the small apartment above his father's legitimate restaurant, before everything changed. Before the rival family's attack that left her dead, and his father transformed by grief into someone unrecognizable, a man who taught his son that vulnerability was weakness and vengeance was justice. "You okay, boss?" Raphael's voice cut through his memories. The bodyguard had insisted on accompanying him inside tonight, concerned about his employer's unusual behavior. "Fine," Vincenzo replied automatically, his eyes never leaving Amelia. How did she know this song? His mother had called it Stella del Cuore, Star of the Heart. It wasn't famous. It wasn't something you'd hear on the radio or learn in music school. When she finished playing, the applause was enthusiastic. Amelia smiled, acknowledging the response with a graceful nod before announcing a short break. As she made her way to the counter, Vincenzo stood. "Stay here," he instructed Raphael, who looked alarmed. Approaching the counter, Vincenzo waited until Amelia noticed him. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You came back," she said, pouring herself a glass of water. "That last piece," he said, bypassing pleasantries. "What was it called?" "Stella del Cuore," she replied, and the confirmation made his chest tighten. "Not many people recognize it. Where did you learn it?" His voice remained controlled, but inside, chaos threatened. Amelia studied him, seeming to sense the importance of her answer. "My grandmother taught it to me. She was from Naples, worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families there before immigrating here." She paused. "She said it was a special lullaby, almost secret. Passed through generations in just a few families." Vincenzo nodded, processing this connection to his past. "It's beautiful." "It is," she agreed, then added hesitantly, "You recognized it." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "My mother used to sing it." Something passed between them then, an understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Amelia opened her mouth to respond when the cafe door opened with a bang, admitting a disheveled young man who stumbled directly to the counter. "Julian," Amelia sighed, her expression shifting to concern mixed with resignation. "You can't keep doing this. I need to talk to you," the young man insisted, his words slurring slightly. He glanced at Vincenzo with unfocused hostility. "Privately. This isn't the time," she replied firmly. "Go home. We'll talk tomorrow." "Always tomorrow with you," Julian muttered. "I'm drowning now, Em. The loan sharks are threatening to break my fingers. How am I supposed to play with broken fingers?" Vincenzo watched the interaction with detached interest, gathering information. The young man, presumably a musician given his comments, had gambling debts. Emilia cared about him but was frustrated. Relationship, family? My brother, Emilia said, as if reading Vincenzo's thoughts. Talented violinist, but terrible at life choices. She turned back to Julian. Wait in the back. I'll find someone to cover the next set. As Julian stumbled toward the rear door, Emilia gave Vincenzo an apologetic look. Family, she said simply. Complicated, he agreed, thinking of his own tangled family legacy. The song, she said, returning to their previous conversation. Would you like me to play it again? The full version has lyrics. The offer caught him unprepared. Part of him wanted to decline, to retreat from this unexpected emotional territory. But another part, a part he'd suppressed for decades, needed to hear it. Yes, he said finally. I would. When she returned to the piano, the audience settled expectantly. Emilia leaned toward the microphone. This next piece is very special, she said. It's called Stella del Cuore, Star of the Heart, a Neapolitan lullaby about finding light in darkness. The melody began softly, familiarly. But when Emilia started singing in perfect accented Italian, Vincenzo felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. Her voice carried the same tender quality his mother's had, the same gentle strength. Even in the darkest night, my child, your heart holds a star. Memories flooded back. His mother's hand stroking his hair, her voice soothing away childhood fears. Before the violence, before he learned to bury his emotions so deeply that even he sometimes forgot they existed. Across the café, Raphael watched his boss with concern. In 15 years of service, he had never seen Vincenzo Moretti look vulnerable. When the song ended, the audience remained silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Emilia acknowledged it gracefully, but her eyes sought out Vincenzo in his corner. What she saw there, a mixture of pain and gratitude, told her more about this mysterious customer than any words could have. After the performance, as the café emptied, Vincenzo lingered. He watched as Emilia dealt with her brother, giving him money from her tip jar and putting him in a taxi with firm instructions to go directly home. Your brother has gambling debts, Vincenzo said when she returned, wiping down tables. She looked up sharply. Were you eavesdropping? He wasn't exactly discreet. Emilia sighed, pushing a curl behind her ear. Julian's brilliant with a violin, but he's fragile. Our grandfather raised us after our parents died, and Julian never quite recovered from losing them. She shook her head. Sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you this. Who does he owe? Vincenzo asked. Some outfit that operates out of the waterfront district. I've been working extra shifts, but... She shrugged helplessly. It's never enough. Vincenzo knew exactly which loan sharks operated near the waterfront. Small-time operators who paid him protection money. One word from him and Julian's debt would vanish. Your grandfather, he said instead, changing the subject. Is he still alive? Emilia's expression softened. Yes, he lives with me. He's the one who encouraged my music, even when everyone said it was impractical. She studied Vincenzo. And your mother, is she... She died when I was 8, he replied, surprised by his willingness to share this information. Long ago. I'm sorry, Emilia said, and the simple sincerity in her voice reached places inside him that had been closed for years. The song helped me remember her, Vincenzo admitted. Thank you for that. The cafe owner appeared from the back, signaling that it was time to close. Vincenzo stood, leaving several large bills on the table. Will you come back? Emilia asked as he prepared to leave. It was a dangerous question with a dangerous answer. Every moment spent in this cafe took him further from the disciplined detachment that had ensured his survival. Yet he found himself saying, Yes, I will. Outside, Raphael waited by the car, his expression carefully neutral. Everything okay, boss? Fine, Vincenzo replied, his composure restored. Just appreciating the music. As they drove away, Vincenzo made a decision. By morning, Julian's gambling debts would disappear. No conditions, no expectations, just a small ripple in the vast ocean of his influence. It meant nothing, he told himself. Just a minor adjustment to his world. But deep down, Where the music had reached, he knew it meant everything. "Dangerous harmonies? You've been distracted," Domenico Russo observed, his tone casual but his eyes sharp as he studied Vincenzo across the expansive desk. As Vincenzo's second-in-command for over a decade, Domenico had earned the right to speak frankly, but today his observation grated. The morning meeting in Vincenzo's downtown office had dragged on longer than usual, with reports from each division of their organization, shipping, construction, protection, gambling, all requiring decisions that Vincenzo found himself surprisingly impatient to make. "I've been considering our police problem," Vincenzo replied, deflecting. "Detective Ortega is becoming too persistent." Domenico nodded, accepting the explanation. "We could arrange something permanent. Make an example of him." 5 days ago, Vincenzo would have agreed without hesitation. Today, the suggestion left him uneasy. Killing a police detective would bring heat they didn't need. At least, that's what he told himself was causing his reluctance. Not yet, he decided. Find out who's feeding him information first. We have a leak somewhere. The meeting concluded shortly after, with Domenico promising to investigate the suspected informant. As his lieutenants filed out, Vincenzo remained seated, contemplating the stack of financial reports before him. Numbers that represented power, control, the empire he'd built from his father's modest criminal operation. It had always been enough. Now, unexpectedly, it felt hollow. 3 times in the past week he had returned to Nocturne. 3 times he had sat in the corner listening to Emilia play, each visit extending longer than the last. Their conversations had evolved from cautious to comfortable, revealing fragments of their lives to each other. He learned about her grandfather Antonio's declining health, her brother's continuing struggles, her dream of opening a music school for underprivileged children. She knew nothing of his real life, of course, just that his name was Vincenzo, that he appreciated music, and that her playing stirred memories he'd long suppressed. "Boss!" Raphael appeared at the door, interrupting his thoughts. "There's something you should see." He handed Vincenzo a tablet displaying security footage from outside Nocturne. The timestamp showed early morning, and the grainy video revealed 2 men approaching the cafe's entrance. Even through the poor quality, Vincenzo recognized them, enforcers who worked for a small-time loan shark named Gustavo. "When was this?" "Yesterday morning," Raphael replied. "They spent 15 minutes inside." Vincenzo felt cold anger spreading through him. He had explicitly ordered Julian's debt to be forgiven. "Someone had disobeyed. Find out what happened," he ordered, "and bring Gustavo to the warehouse tonight." Detective Olivia Reyes stared at the photo on her bulletin board. Vincenzo Moretti exiting a small cafe called Nocturne. It had been taken by a junior officer who spotted Moretti's distinctive car 3 nights ago. "What's so special about this place?" she murmured, studying the image. 5 years she'd been building a case against the Moretti organization, gathering evidence of their involvement in everything from racketeering to bribery of city officials, but never murder. Moretti was too smart to leave that kind of evidence. Her partner, Detective Javier Ortega, leaned against her desk. "Tax records show it's owned by a woman named Francesca Weber. Opened 6 months ago. No criminal connections that we can find. He's been there multiple times," Olivia said. "Moretti doesn't do anything without a reason." "Maybe he just likes coffee," Ortega suggested with a shrug. Olivia shook her head. "We need to know more about this place, and the people who work there." Emilia wiped down the counter, trying to focus on the task rather than the conversation she'd had with her grandfather that morning. His health was deteriorating faster than expected. The specialist they'd seen last week recommended treatments they couldn't possibly afford, even with Julian's gambling debts mysteriously forgiven by the loan sharks. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up, expecting the afternoon rush to begin. Instead, she saw a woman with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor. "Welcome to Nocturne," Emilia greeted her. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lovely place. I'm new to the neighborhood. Thought I'd check it out." Something about her manner put Emilia on alert. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee for now." The woman glanced around the cafe. "Do you play that piano, or is it just decoration?" "I play," Emilia replied. Wednesday and Saturday evenings, usually. Talented and beautiful, came a familiar voice from the doorway. A rare combination. Vincenzo entered, impeccably dressed as always in a tailored suit that radiated quiet authority. His eyes took in the scene, Emilia behind the counter, the strange woman at the bar, and narrowed slightly. "Mr. Moretti," the woman said, turning to face him. "What a coincidence." The air in the cafe seemed to crystallize. Emilia looked between them, confusion giving way to understanding. This woman knew Vincenzo, and she'd called him Mr. Moretti. Not just Vincenzo, as he'd introduced himself to Emilia. "Detective Reyes," Vincenzo acknowledged with a slight nod. "Enjoying your coffee break?" "Just getting to know the local businesses," she replied easily. "You're becoming quite the regular, I hear." "The coffee is exceptional." His tone was pleasant, but Emilia could sense tension beneath it. Detective. The word echoed in Emilia's mind. Why would a detective know Vincenzo by name? And why did her presence make him so obviously uncomfortable? "Well, I should get back to work," Detective Reyes said, leaving cash on the counter. "Nice meeting you," she added to Emilia. After she left, silence hung between them. Emilia busied herself with wiping already clean surfaces, her mind racing. Vincenzo took his usual seat in the corner, watching her. "You have questions," he said finally. Emilia stopped pretending to work and faced him. "Who are you, really?" He considered her for a long moment, as if weighing a decision. "Someone you should probably avoid." "That's not an answer. It's the safest one for you." His expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes betrayed concern. Before Emilia could respond, Julian burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. You won't believe it," he exclaimed, not noticing Vincenzo. "The loan sharks, they tore up my markers. Said the debt was paid." His grin faltered as he finally registered Vincenzo's presence. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." Emilia stared at her brother, then at Vincenzo, pieces clicking into place. "It was you," she said quietly. "You made his debt disappear." Vincenzo neither confirmed nor denied it. But his silence was answer enough. "Why?" she pressed. "Perhaps I have influence in certain circles," he replied carefully. Julian looked between them, confusion evident. "Wait, what's happening?" "Who is this guy?" The moment stretched, taut with unspoken revelations. Then the cafe door opened again, admitting Raphael, whose urgent expression signaled trouble. "Boss," he said, ignoring proprieties. "We need to go now." Vincenzo stood, buttoning his jacket. "We'll continue this conversation another time," he told Emilia. As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Vincenzo." When he paused, she asked the question whose answer she already feared. "What does Detective Reyes want with you?" His smile was tinged with something like regret. "To put me in prison, of course." The door closed behind him, leaving Emilia and Julian alone with the implications of what had just transpired. Julian said slowly. "Who exactly is your new friend?" Emilia sank onto a bar stool, her mind reeling. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But I think he might be dangerous." Outside, Vincenzo slid into the back seat of his car, his expression hardening into the mask his associates knew well. "What happened?" he demanded. "Gustavo talked," Raphael reported, "before we got to him. Went straight to Ortega with information about our shipping operation. They're moving on the harbor warehouse tonight." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. Betrayal upon betrayal. First the leak that had almost led to his capture, now this deliberate defiance from Gustavo. The empire he'd built was showing cracks, and he knew what needed to be done to repair them. Yet as they drove away from Nocturne, all he could think about was the look on Emilia's face when she realized who he might be. The disappearing warmth in her eyes. The fear replacing connection. "Take me to the warehouse," he ordered. "It's time to remind everyone why they fear the Moretti name." But for the first time in his life, the thought of reinforcing that fear left a bitter taste in his mouth. Crescendo blood splattered across Vincenzo's immaculate white shirt as his fist connected with Gustavo's face for the third time. The loan shark sagged in the chair where Raphael had tied him, his breathing labored, eyes swollen shut. I gave you specific instructions, Vincenzo said, his voice deadly quiet. The debt was to be forgiven. No harassment, no threats. A simple task. Gustavo spat blood onto the concrete floor of the warehouse. Those enforcers cost money, he wheezed. I got a business to run. You have a business because I allow it, Vincenzo corrected him. A detail you seem to have forgotten. Around them, the warehouse hummed with activity as workers hastily removed evidence of their smuggling operation. Thanks to Gustavo's betrayal, they had hours, not days, to clear out before the police arrived. Millions in merchandise and cash needed relocation, computer records required purging, and contingency plans had to be activated. Domenico approached, his expression grim. The last trucks are loaded. We need to move. Vincenzo nodded, turning back to Gustavo. In the past, this situation would have had only one resolution: a bullet and a body dumped in the harbor. Simple, efficient. The expected response from the man they called the executioner behind his back. Instead, he found himself hesitating. Emilia's face flashed in his mind, the way she looked at him before she knew, with warmth and genuine interest. The way that look changed when Detective Reyes appeared. The music she played that somehow reached through decades of cultivated coldness to touch something he thought long dead. Lock him in the storage room, Vincenzo decided. We'll deal with him after we've secured the merchandise. Domenico's surprise was evident, but quickly masked. As you wish. As his lieutenant led the captive away, Vincenzo became aware of his bloodied shirt, the ache in his knuckles. Violence had been his language for so long, the tool that built his empire, the weapon that protected it. Yet now, it felt foreign, like speaking words whose meaning he suddenly questioned. The police will be here within the hour, Raphael reminded him. We need to go. Vincenzo nodded, following his bodyguard toward the exit. Behind them, the warehouse stood nearly empty, erased of evidence like footprints in sand washed away by the tide. Another location would be secured, operations would resume, and business would continue. The machine he had built was efficient, adaptable. But as they drove away, sirens wailing in the distance, Vincenzo wondered for the first time if efficiency was enough. The cafe was closed when he arrived just after midnight. Emilia had locked up hours ago, but lights still glowed from the apartment above. Vincenzo stood in the shadows across the street, watching, knowing he shouldn't be there but unable to stay away. Earlier, he'd witnessed the police raid from a safe distance. Detective Reyes looking furious as her team found an empty warehouse, a temporary victory in their ongoing chess match. Normally, he would have celebrated with a fine whiskey in his penthouse, planning the next move. Instead, he found himself drawn here, to this small cafe that had somehow become more significant than any of his legitimate businesses or illegal operations. His phone vibrated, Domenico reporting that the new location was secure. All merchandise accounted for, business as usual despite the setback. Vincenzo should have felt satisfied. Instead, he felt hollow. A movement in the apartment window caught his attention. Emilia appeared briefly, silhouetted against the light, then vanished. Before he could reconsider, Vincenzo crossed the street and climbed the narrow stairs to the side entrance that led to the apartment. He knocked softly, aware of the risk he was taking. Moments passed, then the door opened a crack, secured by a chain. Emilia's eyes widened at the sight of him. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I needed to see you," he admitted. To explain, her gaze dropped to his shirt, visible beneath his open coat. "Is that blood?" Vincenzo glanced down, having forgotten the evidence of his earlier violence. "Not mine." She started to close the door, but he placed his hand against it gently. "Please," he said. 5 minutes." After a hesitation that felt eternal, Emilia removed the chain and opened the door wider. "My grandfather is sleeping," she warned. "If you wake him—" "I won't," Vincenzo promised, stepping inside. The apartment was small but warm, filled with mismatched furniture that somehow created a harmonious whole. Photos covered one wall, Emilia and Julian as children, an older man with Emilia at her graduation, the three of them together at what appeared to be Julian's first concert. "Who are you?" Emilia asked again, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes. The truth this time. Vincenzo removed his coat, buying time as he formulated an answer that wouldn't terrify her further. My name is Vincenzo Moretti, he began. I run several businesses in this city. And one of those businesses put Detective Reyes on your trail? Her tone was skeptical. I'm not naive, Vincenzo. No, he agreed. You're not. He met her gaze directly. Some of my operations exist outside the law. The police have been trying to build a case against me for years. You're a criminal, she stated flatly. The word hung between them, stark and undeniable, yet somehow inadequate to describe the complexity of his existence. Yes, he admitted, though I prefer a businessman with flexible ethics. And Julian's debt? You made it disappear because I could, Vincenzo replied simply. Because it mattered to you. Emilia shook her head, disbelief evident. So what? You heard me play a song that reminded you of your mother and suddenly you're doing good deeds? People like you don't change, Vincenzo. Her words struck with unexpected force. People like me, he repeated softly. You don't know what made me who I am. Then tell me, she challenged. So he did. Standing in her small living room, Vincenzo Moretti broke the silence he'd maintained for decades. He told her about his mother's murder when rival gangsters attacked his father's restaurant. About his father's transformation from a mostly legitimate businessman into a vengeful criminal who taught his son that mercy was weakness. About the empire he'd built after his father's death, expanding through calculated violence and strategic alliances. And finally, about the emptiness that had grown inside him, unacknowledged until her music forced him to recognize it. The first night I heard you play, he concluded, was the first time in 30 years I remembered who I was before all of this. Before I became this. Emilia had listened without interruption, her expression shifting from fear to something more complex, not acceptance. Exactly, but understanding. Why are you telling me this? She asked when he finished. Why come here tonight? Vincenzo moved to the window, looking out at the city that had been his kingdom and his prison. I don't know, he admitted. Perhaps I wanted someone to see me as I am just once before... Before what? He turned back to her. Things are changing. Alliances shifting. The police getting closer. He shrugged, attempting nonchalance. The life I've built has an expiration date. I've always known that. A door opened down the hall and an elderly man appeared, leaning heavily on a cane. Antonio Ruiz looked frailer than his photo suggested, his face lined with pain but his eyes sharp and alert. Emilia? He called. Is everything all right? Yes, abuelo, she replied quickly, moving to his side. This is a friend. Vincenzo. Antonio studied the well-dressed stranger in his living room with the perceptiveness of the elderly. You're the one who's been coming to hear her play, he stated rather than asked. Yes, sir, Vincenzo replied, surprising himself with the respectful address. He was just leaving, Emilia added, with a pointed look at Vincenzo. Antonio placed a gnarled hand on his granddaughter's arm. The kettle's empty. Would you mind? It was a transparent attempt to speak privately with Vincenzo, but Emilia reluctantly complied, disappearing into the kitchen with a warning glance. Once they were alone, Antonio gestured to the sofa. Sit with an old man for a moment. Vincenzo obliged, feeling strangely deferential to this fragile figure whose presence nonetheless commanded respect. I know who you are. Mr. Moretti, Antonio said without preamble. Your reputation precedes you. Vincenzo maintained a neutral expression. Does it concern you that I've been visiting your granddaughter's café? That depends, Antonio replied, on whether you come as the man they write about in the newspapers or as someone else. His roomy eyes held Vincenzo's steadily. She sees something in you, something worth reaching. She's mistaken, Vincenzo said quietly. Antonio shook his head. My Emilia has always seen clearly. It's her gift. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. The question is whether you're brave enough to become what she sees. Before Vincenzo could respond, Emilia returned with a tea tray. Abuelo, you should be resting. The doctor said, Doctors? Antonio scoffed. What do they know about living? Nevertheless, he struggled to his feet. But I'll go. You two have more to discuss, I think. After helping her grandfather back to his room, Emilia returned to find Vincenzo standing, coat in hand. I should go, he said. I've put you at risk just by coming here. Why did you? She pressed. The real reason. Vincenzo considered deflecting, offering another partial truth. But something about this place, about her, demanded honesty. Because you make me wish I'd made different choices, he admitted. And because I needed to warn you, the police may come asking questions. About me, about my visits to the cafe. And what should I tell them? Her voice was steady, but he could see.